Forget about Nintendo games, and the Switch still has one of the strongest libraries of any console ever.
We nailed it, Senpai!
Here are the 10 best third-party games on the Nintendo Switch. Number 10, Doom Eternal. Remember when people were skeptical the Switch could even run the first Doom reboot? Developer Panic Button did the impossible and took the even more ambitious follow-up by id Software and thoughtfully brought the blazing fast first-person shooter to the humble hardware of Nintendo's part-time handheld. That's going to come with a cap of 30 frames per second, but it's a good-looking 30 frames per second. Not to mention the game itself is actually great. This takes the manic pace of the first game and expands with even more tools, enemies, and lots of demon blood, all on the fun kiddie system. Number 9, No Man's Sky. Let's swing the pendulum over to the other side, as this is not a ranked list, and take a look at No Man's Sky, which doesn't quite nail its frame rate in the busier combat sections. Is this a combat game? No, not really, but we want to get the problems out of the way, because other than this, you have an entire galaxy to explore. Procedural generation has a mixed reputation today, but Hello Games has spent nearly a decade refining its style with new ships and base building. No Man's Sky is one of the most ambitious games ever made, and it's a perfect escape anywhere on the Nintendo Switch. Number 8, Shin Megami Tensei 5. You know, if memory serves, Shin Megami Tensei 5 was well regarded as an Atlas RPG, but considered an inessential exclusive on the Nintendo Switch by some naysayers. We'll suppose that trash talk was some sort of percussive maintenance, because ever since it's been announced for more consoles, this fantastic open-world role-playing game is being given a second shot at appraisal, and it's already one of the best games on the whole Switch platform. A war between gods and demons probably shouldn't look this slick or have this bumping of a soundtrack, but then we suppose it wouldn't be an Atlas game. Number 7, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. Considering how poorly optimized CD Projekt Red games tend to be at launch, the expectation for The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt was decidedly low, but the result was anything but. With a lot of creative choices, that means this won't look nearly as good as it does on your Xbox Series X or PlayStation 5, but this version is built perfectly with the Switch's limitations in mind. So the game, whatever you want to say about it by comparison, looks really good. And you can take it with you on the go with the Switch. A strong proposition when you remember how few games can match the scope of The Witcher 3. Number 6, Dragon Ball FighterZ. Nintendo hasn't been the home for fighting games in some time beyond its own Super Smash Bros. Franchise. That was until this generation saw a flood of excellent retro ports and fight stick options released on the Switch. One of the newer fighters is the blisteringly fast Dragon Ball FighterZ. Based on the brilliant Akira Toriyama manga and anime, this button masher friendly fighter has a surprising amount of depth, placing it high above the rest of the pack, at least mechanically, as the best Dragon Ball video game of all time. Yeah, we said it. Number 5, Theater Rhythm Final Bar Line. A rhythm game is only as good as its music, and this game happens to be non-stop Final Fantasy music. Oh, you don't like Final Fantasy music? Really? You've never swayed to the theme of Final Fantasy 13 or nodded along to the choir of Sephiroth? God help us, Final Fantasy 15 even has some bangers. And if you've answered no, we promise you, Theater Rhythm Final Bar Line will change your mind. The graphics are adorable recreations, or sometimes even have the original cutscenes of Final Fantasy games. But most of the time, you'll be too busy bopping around to the Legend of Mana soundtrack. Whoa, they got Mana music on here too? Number 4, Octopath Traveler 2. One of the selling points of the Switch was its timed exclusive Octopath Traveler, a game which tried its best to revive the classic JRPG formula for modern audiences with a full-budget presentation of 2.5D and an expansive story crossing multiple characters. But, well, it was bad. The story, we mean. The game was good, the graphics were great, but the story, that was very bad. Octopath Traveler 2 actually has a plot that is interesting and relates to the events at hand, which was really all it needed to appear on this list. Even if you aren't familiar with older games or the first Octopath Traveler 2 is a strong recommend thanks to its non-stop charm and wonder. Number 3, Persona 5 Royal. Oh, we saw this coming. The Phantom Themes kicked up a storm of awards and acclaim with the first version of Persona 5. Its revision, Persona 5 Royal, is even better, with thoughtful changes and additions to the narrative, including a whole new character. Persona has a storied history with handheld versions of their console games, and seeing Persona on a tiny screen just feels right. But it never looks so good or styling as it does here with Persona 5 Royal. Number 2, Nier Automata. Okay, put your judgments to the side and play Nier Automata. Seriously, this is one of the greatest single-player games of all time. We're talking some of the finest hack-and-slash combat from Platinum Games, which also has a hacker spaceship shooter minigame and the ability to destroy your own character by fatally removing an important component from your inventory. Did any of that make sense? No, of course not, it didn't. But that's because it's Yoko Taro. It's not supposed to make sense. He wants his games to be bonkers. And if this is the end result, please, Mr. Taro, do all you can. But before you brush this game aside as all nonsense, please know Nier Automata has a lot to say about what it means to be alive. And unlike so much other science fiction gibberish, it really does work well here. Strong recommend. Number 1. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. Did you forget this was a ranked list? Well, you probably remember now, because Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 might seem, well, a bit basic of a choice. But no, this is the sort of sleeper masterpiece that anyone old enough to remember will know and love well. Tony Hawk didn't adapt to games adapted to Tony Hawk, with the extreme sports genre never quite leaving the Birdman shadow until EA Skate several years later. You have some of the best level design ever featured in a game, and it became so popular back then that today we get a tremendous pair of remakes on one cart. And some people still might shrug it off. If that's you, especially you, please play some Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. You will be happy, we promise. And that's gonna do it for this list. We've got even more Switch games here on Game Rant because, believe it or not, there's a lot of Switch games out there. Over 100 at least. So we'll see you there.